Welcome back to Reddit Tales by Uncle Sammy. I see you, I appreciate you, and I'm thankful you subscribe and keep showing up. This space is built on your insights. Leave your thoughts and lessons below. Now, cue the tension, cue the truth, let's get into it. Before this story starts, I want to point out one detail that matters. When somebody answers a boundary with mockery instead of care, the issue is usually not the other person. It is their comfort with disrespect. In this story, the warning sign was not only that my wife kept making room for another man, it was that she wanted me to feel unreasonable for noticing. That is the kind of moment people talk themselves out of, and it usually costs them more later. If you have ever watched somebody call disrespect nothing, and then act shocked when everything falls apart, this story is going to hit hard. Stay with me all the way through, because what starts with one sentence in a marriage turns into consequences nobody can talk their way out of. Like, share, and subscribe for more real relationship drama stories with lessons that stay with you. My name is Ellis Mercer, and the year my marriage cracked open, I was 38 years old, living on the west side of Detroit in a brick duplex we rented near a bus line that never ran on time in winter. I managed facilities operations for a private rehab hospital in Dearborn, which meant I was the person people called when a boiler coughed, a generator hiccuped, or an inspection report came back with red marks all over it. My life ran on logs, vendor calls, laminated checklists, and coffee that tasted like burnt pennies. I liked it that way. Predictable work made me feel steady, even when nothing else did. My wife, Rochelle, was 34 and worked part-time at a community arts nonprofit downtown, the kind of place that hosted teen mural workshops and jazz fundraisers in converted warehouses with exposed pipes and soft yellow lights. She had taste. Everybody said that first. She knew how to turn a thrift store lamp into something elegant and how to make a room feel curated with 3 candles and a bowl of lemons. She also had a way of speaking that made ordinary things sound final. If she said, "That is not what happened," people often doubted their own memory before they doubted her. I noticed that too late. We had been married 4 years, together for 7. We met at a Labor Day cookout in Southfield when her aunt complained that I stacked paper plates like a man who alphabetizes his socks. Rochelle laughed so hard she spilled ginger ale on her sandal. And later she told me the order in a man was attractive because too many people move through life carelessly. That should have made us a good fit. I was careful. She claimed to want care. But over time I learned she meant care directed toward her moods, her preferences, her shifting definitions of what counted as neglect. In the beginning, I confused her intensity with honesty. She cried openly, got excited loudly, and loved hard in visible ways. I came from a family that believed feelings should be folded neatly and put away before company came over. My father was a deacon who ironed handkerchiefs on Saturday night for Sunday service. My mother taught 3rd grade for 30 years and said things like, "Not every thought needs a parade." Rochelle felt different from that world. Alive, I thought. Necessary. She brought color into my life. What I did not see was how quickly color can become smoke when every disagreement gets treated like a personal insult. We married in October under a cold sky that threatened rain and never delivered. My cousin's gospel group sang during the ceremony, and Rochelle walked down the aisle in a satin gown with little pearl buttons all the way up the back. At the reception, my Uncle Bernard carved turkey with a pocket knife because the catering staff forgot the serving utensils. Rochelle laughed about that for months. "Your people will survive anything," she said. I loved that she called them my people with affection. I thought marriage meant building a team. I did not understand yet how often I would end up being the entire infrastructure by myself. The shift started the year the hospital got bought by a bigger chain. New ownership meant audits, vendor cuts, emergency meetings, and 12-hour days that became 14 before I realized it. I was not chasing a title for ego. I was protecting my department from layoffs and trying to keep my crew from getting blamed every time some executive in a fitted suit made a bad decision from a conference room in another state. Rochelle said she understood. She even kissed my forehead one morning and told me, "Do what you need to do." I know this season is heavy. I held on to that sentence longer than I should have. Understanding, in Rochelle's hands, had an expiration date. At first it showed up as comments tossed into the sink water while she washed produce or adjusted earrings in the hallway mirror. "You missed dinner again." I guess your clipboard gets more conversation than I do. You know the dog next door recognizes your headlights better than I do. None of those were screaming fights. They were little cuts, designed to make me defend myself over a schedule I had already explained. I tried compensating. I brought home lemon chess pie from a diner near Michigan Avenue. I left notes on the fridge. I shifted meetings when I could. It was never enough. The man's name was Darian Polk. Rochelle said it in passing the first time, almost lazily, while painting her toenails on a towel spread over the living room rug. He was, according to her, an old friend from college who had moved back to Detroit after divorce in St. Louis. He knows everybody in nonprofit circles. She said, "You would like him. Actually, he is organized." I remember looking up from my laptop and thinking that was a strange thing to say about another man to your husband, but it passed. Darian was just a name. Married people mention names. I let it pass. Then Darian became a person who kept appearing in the margins of our life. He had helped carry folding tables after a fundraiser. He had recommended a printer for the nonprofit's gala booklets. He had dropped off extra seedlings from a black-owned nursery because Rochelle wanted herbs for the kitchen window. His presence arrived in anecdotes first. That is how some disruptions enter a home. Not with a bang, but with a casual mention while the microwave hums and the weather app predicts sleet. If I asked a question, Rochelle answered quickly, sometimes too quickly, as if curiosity itself was a nuisance she needed to swat aside. I did make one early decision that could have gone another way. I could have pressed harder then, asked to meet him, made my discomfort plain, maybe even drawn a line while the matter was still abstract. Instead, I told myself I was not a suspicious man and did not want to become one just because my hours were long and my wife had a social world that included other adults. My father used to say insecurity makes a person volunteer for humiliation before anyone else asks. I did not want to audition for that role. So I stayed measured, and Rochelle mistook me for blind. Winter came down hard that year. The sidewalks crusted white. Salt stained everybody's boots. The radiator in our upstairs bedroom hissed like it had opinions. Rochelle started staying out later after evening events, saying she was networking or helping with cleanup or grabbing tea with people from the Arts Council. She always had a reason, and the reasons were believable if you did not line them up side by side. She got more protective of her phone, too. She never used to care where she left it. Suddenly, it lived face down on side tables, tucked under throw blankets, carried to the bathroom for no clear purpose. One Thursday, I got home around 11 after an inspection ran long because a contractor mislabeled 2 shutoff valves and nearly set my blood pressure through the roof. Our kitchen smelled like roasted garlic and something citrusy. Rochelle was sitting at the counter in one of my old university sweatshirts, laughing quietly at a message. When I kissed the side of her head, she flinched first and then covered it with a smile. That tiny body response landed in me like a dropped wrench. Not proof, not enough for a charge. Just one of those moments your spirit notices before your mind catches up. At my barbershop on Joy Road, men talked about everything except the things that actually hurt them. Lions football, city taxes, nephews acting wild, old songs that used real bass. My barber, Mr. Leon, had known me since high school. He limed my beard one Saturday and said, "You've got that married man forehead. Too much thinking under there." I laughed, but he kept clipping and watching me in the mirror. "Whatever you are excusing," he said, "make sure it is not training somebody to treat you cheap." He did not know the details. He was speaking from age and pattern. I heard him. I did not act yet. Rochelle and I had a standing Friday ritual when life was not too chaotic. We would stop by a fish place near Grand River, bring home perch dinners with too many hot sauce packets, and watch old courtroom reruns with the captions on, because she liked reading people's lies as much as listening to them. That ritual started slipping. She had fundraisers, donor mixers, planning sessions, gallery previews. When I offered to go with her, she often said it would be boring for me or too crowded or more her work world than ours. That word hits me every time. Our marriage was apparently something she stepped out of and into. The first time I saw Darian in person, it was by accident. I had left my badge on my desk and swung back to the hospital on a Sunday afternoon because Monday mornings become disasters when you start scavenging for access cards. On my way home, I stopped at a coffee shop in Corktown to get Rochelle the cinnamon tea she liked. Through the front window, I saw her sitting at a table near the back. Darien sat across from her, close enough that their knees could have touched under the table. He leaned in when she laughed. She touched his wrist mid-sentence like it belonged there. I stood outside with cold air in my lungs and made my second decision point. I could have walked in immediately, let the bell over the door announce me, forced the truth into daylight while both of them were still warm in it. Instead, I kept standing there, tea order forgotten, because I wanted one more second to understand what I was seeing without the mess of performance. Then Rochelle looked up and saw me through the glass. Her face did not show shock at first. It showed irritation. That was the part that changed me. I walked in after that, slow and polite. "Ellis," she said, like I had interrupted an appointment she had every right to keep. Darien stood halfway, offered his hand, and introduced himself with the confidence of a man who had been assured he was not crossing anything meaningful. He was clean-cut handsome in an easy way, with a navy peacoat draped over his chair and the kind of voice people use when they know rooms tend to receive them well. I shook his hand because I am still me, even when angry. Rochelle told me they had just bumped into each other after she left an event. A bad lie gets heavier when 3 people must carry it. I sat down for 5 minutes. That felt like 20. Darien talked about nonprofit burnout, city funding, and some redevelopment projects near Eastern Market. Rochelle smiled too much. She kept steering the conversation away from specifics, which only highlighted them. When I finally stood to leave, I told her I would see her at home. She said, "Do not start. Not in the car. Not later. Not after thought." Right there in front of him, as if my reaction was the real inconvenience. I drove home gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles hurt. I remember a church marquee in the dark that read "Hold Fast." It almost made me laugh. At home, Rochelle came in 40 minutes later carrying no tea, no apology, and no urgency. She set her purse down carefully, buying time. I asked one simple question. "Why did you lie?" She exhaled through her nose and said they were only talking, which was not an answer. I asked why she had hidden it. She said, "Because I make everything weird." That sentence sat in our dining room like a stain. I told her there was a difference between privacy and secrecy, and that meeting another man alone, then acting irritated when your husband discovers it, was not a small thing. She rolled her eyes before she answered. "You're always at work," she said. "What is the big deal if I spend time with him?" She said it with one shoulder lifted, almost bored, like we were discussing the thermostat. I had prepared myself for deflection, not that level of contempt. I asked whether she heard herself. She said I was turning friendship into betrayal because my life revolved around schedules and emergencies, and I expected hers to sit still until I clocked out. Then she hit me with the old accusation, the one she used whenever she wanted moral altitude. "You are controlling when you feel guilty." I looked at her and understood she had been rehearsing that line. I did not scream. That mattered to me, maybe more than it should have. Men who look like me do not always get the luxury of visible anger without consequences. And besides, I knew yelling would only help her rewrite the scene later. So I said my piece plainly. I told Rochelle that time with another man was a big deal when it required lies, secrecy, and disrespect. I told her I was setting a boundary, not issuing a command. No more private meetings with Darien, and we needed counseling if she wanted this marriage intact. She laughed once, short and sharp. "You cannot schedule people into loving you right." After that fight, she became oddly cheerful for 3 days, which disturbed me more than tears would have. She hummed while watering the basil on the windowsill. She asked whether I wanted cornbread with dinner. She texted me a photo of snowfall outside the art center with a heart emoji like nothing had shifted. Sometimes people smooth over the top of a crack because they know going underneath it would require truth. I watched her move through our house like a woman managing optics, not damage. I started noticing what belonged to me, what we had bought together, what accounts were tied to my name, what obligations still assumed partnership. Then came the scarf. It was not dramatic. No lipstick on a collar. No grand reveal. I was cleaning out the backseat of Rochelle's Buick before taking it to get the brakes checked, and tucked under a reusable grocery bag was a charcoal men's scarf that smelled faintly of clove cigarettes and laundry beads we did not use. Darien had worn a scarf like that at the coffee shop. I held it in my hands long enough for the denial to drain out. People who are innocent do not accumulate somebody else's winter accessories in private corners of shared life. They just do not. Rochelle got home to find the scarf folded on the kitchen table beside the mail. She stopped when she saw it, then recovered too fast. He left that in my car after we dropped off supplies, she said. No pause to remember, no surprise at seeing it there, no question about why I had found it. I asked how many rides Darien had taken in her car. She said I was being dramatic again. I asked whether she had any interest in saving our marriage. She stared at me like I had moved the furniture wrong. I am not doing this every week, she said. Believe what you want. Something in me cooled then, not shattered, cooled. People talk about heartbreak as a loud event, but sometimes it is a thermostat clicking off. That same night, after Rochelle went upstairs and shut the bedroom door harder than necessary, I sat at the dining table with a legal pad and wrote down facts. Lease renewal due in 2 months. Utilities in my name except the internet. Joint savings were small, mostly for home repairs we never made because the landlord handled the big stuff, and Rochelle kept finding better uses for the rest. My paycheck covered most of our actual life. That list did not make me angry. It made me precise. I spoke to an attorney the next Tuesday during my lunch break from my truck in the hospital parking lot while sleet tapped the windshield. She was a family lawyer in Southfield recommended by one of our nurse managers after her sister's divorce. I was not calling to launch missiles. I wanted to know where the floor was beneath my feet. The attorney asked calm questions, explained property distinctions, account protections, occupancy rights, and the importance of not making emotional decisions without documentation. I wrote everything down in my facility's notebook between reminders about fire doors and vendor bids. It felt strange, turning my marriage into action items. It also felt necessary. My next decision could have changed everything too. I could have confronted Darien directly, man to man, as people like to say, and I know some men would have respected that route more. I chose not to because my issue was not with the easiest target. He was a symptom. Rochelle was my wife. She had made vows with me, built a home with me, accepted my labor and steadiness and late nights, and all the invisible things that make ordinary life function. Going in first would have let her become a bystander in her own choices. I refused to rearrange responsibility that way. I tried one more constructive route, because I needed to know I had not skipped integrity. I scheduled a counseling consultation at a practice in Farmington Hills, and texted Rochelle the date and time. I wrote, "We need help or we need honesty. Pick one." She replied 2 hours later with, "I am not paying someone to gang up on me, because you are insecure." That was the whole message. No curiosity, no counteroffer, no attempt. When effort becomes one-sided, it is no longer repaired. It is maintenance. And I was exhausted from maintaining something the other person kept kicking holes in for fresh air. The unraveling after that was gradual, almost bureaucratic. I opened a new checking account. I moved my direct deposit. I copied insurance papers, tax returns, the title paperwork for my truck, and the receipt for the upright freezer in the basement that I had bought after my mother taught me that black families should always have enough food put away for emergencies. I did not sneak. I acted discreetly. There is a difference. I also began sleeping in the guest room downstairs, near the washer and dryer, where the pipes clicked at night, and the little basement window showed only snow crust and passing headlights. Rochelle noticed, of course. She just misread what she was seeing. She thought my withdrawal was sulking, another version of me waiting to be soothed back into usefulness. One night she stood in the guest room doorway wearing a silk bonnet and crossed arms, saying, "You are really doing all this over friend?" I told her I was doing it out of contempt. That word landed. She frowned like it was too academic for the conversation, too exact. "You always make things sound bigger than they are," she said. "No," I answered. "You make them smaller, so you do not have to answer for them." My mother came by one Sunday after church with a foil pan of smothered turkey wings and green beans cooked down the proper way. She had noticed I looked thinner and quieter. Mothers who have kept households together on modest incomes develop a radar for strain. We stood in the kitchen while Rochelle was supposedly out running errands. I did not tell Mama everything. I said enough. Her face settled into that disappointed stillness she wore when a student used a bright mind carelessly. Being busy at work is not permission for betrayal, she said. And confusion is expensive, baby. Do not rent space to it. In early March, with dirty snow piled like old receipts along the curb, Rochelle hosted a planning meeting for an arts fundraiser at our house. Without fully asking me, 5 people crowded around our dining table, eating cheese straws and speaking in nonprofit shorthand. Darien was one of them. I came home to his laugh in my living room and froze in the entryway with cold air still trapped in my coat. Rochelle introduced this setup, as if it were perfectly normal. "We are almost done," she said. Darien gave me that same mild nod from the coffee shop, comfortable because she had made him comfortable. I did not create a scene. Instead, I walked upstairs, changed out of my work clothes, and listened to the murmur below while staring at our wedding photo on the dresser. In it, Rochelle's hand rested over mine, both of us smiling in that expensive innocence people celebrate with cake. I thought about coming downstairs and telling everybody to leave. I thought about embarrassing her the way she had embarrassed me. I chose not to because I no longer wanted victory inside the marriage. I wanted to leave. Once I admitted that, the room felt different, less like a battlefield, more like a building already condemned. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Nothing dramatic happened that morning. I still checked pressure gauges at work. I still reminded a contractor not to prop open a fire door. I still ate vending machine peanuts at 3:15 because lunch had gotten away from me. Then I left early, drove to my attorney's office, signed papers, and watched my name move across documents that turned private pain into a legal process. The server reached Rochelle the next day at her nonprofit office. She called me 12 times in 20 minutes. I answered once. She was breathless with outrage. "You filed for divorce before even talking to me?" I almost laughed at that, not because anything was funny, but because some lies collapse under their own weight if you let them breathe. "We talked," I said, "many times." She cried then real tears, which made things harder for a second because I did love her once, and the body does not always keep pace with the mind. She said I was humiliating her. I said what humiliated her was treating marriage like a waiting room she could step out of whenever she wanted. She accused me of being cruel, rigid, and impossible. I heard pain in her voice, but not accountability. There's a difference there, too. The months that followed were slow and expensive in all the ordinary ways divorce tend to be. Rochelle moved from outrage to bargaining to revision. 1 week, she wanted to save the marriage. The next, she said I had emotionally abandoned her first. Then she claimed Darien had only been a friend until I pushed her away. That line angered me more than the rest because it tried to turn her choices into weather I had created. Meanwhile, the nonprofit cut her hours after a funding shortfall, which meant she fell behind on household expenses she had promised to cover once I moved out and stopped subsidizing everything. I rented a small apartment in Oak Park above a retired postal worker who played radio gospel on Sunday mornings and swept his own walkway before sunrise. It had plain beige walls, a narrow galley kitchen, and windows that rattled when a bus went by, but it was quiet in the way a deep breath is quiet. I bought a used leather chair from a teacher in Ferndale, moved my books in milk crates, and hung exactly one framed photograph. My late grandfather in overalls standing beside the first house he ever owned. I needed reminders of steady men, not stylish rooms curated over unstable ground. Darien did not vanish immediately. He kept hovering around Rochelle through the spring, helping, advising, appearing in stories she told mutual friends. But hovering is easy when the stakes are emotional and the appetizers are free. By summer, when her landlord began threatening action over late payments and the divorce made certain financial realities official, his helpfulness thinned. He stopped showing up to practical errands. He was unavailable when she needed someone to co-sign storage, help move furniture, or cover a utility bill. That was the karma people later tried to package as justice. To me, it looked simpler. Fantasies rarely volunteer for paperwork. Rochelle called me in July from an unknown number while I was parked outside a diner in Livonia after a vendor breakfast meeting. Ceiling fan spun inside. Somebody at the counter was arguing kindly about grits. I should not have answered, but I did. She said she needed help because she had received a court notice from her landlord and did not know where she and her things would go. I let her speak. Then I asked the question that had been growing inside me for months. When exactly did you think this would become my responsibility again? The silence after that was the first honest thing between us. She cried softer this time, less angry, more afraid. She said she had made mistakes. She said Darian had turned out not to be who she thought. She said she had been lonely. All of that may have been true. Truth can arrive late and still be true. But late truth does not. Erase consequences. I told her I hoped she called her sister in Toledo, because family is who you lean on when pride stops paying rent. I also told her I was not the bridge back to stability after she burned the one we had. It hurts to say. It also freed me. Her eviction happened in August, not with dramatic curbside heap, but with the kind of procedural humiliation most adults fear more. Deadlines missed, extensions denied, movers rushed, belongings stacked in a storage unit she could barely afford. I heard through Rochelle's cousin that she ended up staying with relatives for a while outside Cleveland. People love the phrase karma because it makes consequences sound mystical and satisfying. There was nothing satisfying about it. It was sad. It was avoidable. It was a chain of small arrogances and ignored warnings finally adding up to math nobody could charm their way around. I spent that fall relearning my own rhythms. Saturday mornings I bought peaches or apples from Easter Market, depending on the month, and listened to old Anita Baker songs while meal prepping for the week. I joined a men's group at church, not because I want to perform healing, but because grown men need places where grief can be named without turning into spectacle. I started taking the long way home from work through tree-lined streets when leaves browned at the edges. I noticed I slept through the night more often. Peace did not arrive like fireworks. It arrived with lower blood pressure and unclenched shoulders. Looking back, I can see how often I mistook restraint for wisdom. Sometimes I was wise. Sometimes I was simply afraid of disrupting the image of being the dependable one. I stayed measured because I did not want to become the story of an angry black husband who overreacted. I swallowed things because I wanted to be fair. Fairness matters. But fairness without self-protection becomes a costume people use to access you cheaply. That was one of the hardest truths. Rochelle did not only cross lines. I helped erase them by staying after they were crossed, hoping maturity would make disrespect feel smaller. The divorce was finalized just before Thanksgiving. I signed the last document in a conference room that smelled faintly of toner and stale coffee, then drove straight to my mother's house, where sweet potatoes were cooling on the stove and my father was arguing with the thermostat like it had insulted scripture. Nobody made a speech. Mama just handed me a bowl to peel apples for the cobbler. That ordinary task steadied me more than any grand closure could have. Life does keep moving, not because pain is fake, but because dishes still need drying, and somebody still has to season the greens properly. The last time I saw Rochelle was by chance the following spring in a grocery store in Southfield. She looked thinner, quieter, less polished. I probably did too in different ways. We stood by the floral cooler with tulips between us like a joke neither of us deserved. She said hello. I said hello back. There was no scene, no apology big enough for a movie, no hidden longing. Just two people who had once built a life and then watched one person treat it like something reusable. I walked away with salmon, asparagus, and a clean conscience. Some endings are not loud. They are exact. If this ending proved anything, it is that boundaries only matter when you are willing to stand on them. Rochelle thought Ellis would keep absorbing the disrespect, and that choice cost her more than she expected. Like this video. Share it with somebody who needs to hear this. And subscribe for more gripping cheating, betrayal, and karma stories told with heart, detail, and real emotional weight. When I think about this story now, I do not think first about Darian or even the divorce papers. I think about the coffee shop window, the scarf in the car, and that planning meeting in my house. Small moments tell the truth long before disaster does. Boundaries are not proven by how many times you repeat them. They are proven by what you do after they are ignored. I did not win anything by leaving Rochelle. I just stopped volunteering to be the cushion for consequences that belong to somebody else. The end.